Hello Midnights. We hope you enjoy our stories. Next one, Elusive Force, Telekinesis and the Enduring Mystery of Psi Abilities. Let us know where you are listening from and don't forget to subscribe. Telekinesis, often depicted in science fiction as a dramatic display of power, is but one facet of a broader category of phenomena known as psi abilities. These encompass a range of purported mental or paranormal capabilities, including telepathy, mind-to-mind communication, clairvoyance, perceiving distant events, precognition, foreknowledge of future events, and psychokinesis, the ability to influence physical systems with the mind, of which telekinesis is a subset focusing on movement. While these concepts are deeply ingrained in popular culture and spiritual traditions, their scientific standing remains a subject of intense debate, skepticism, and occasional intrigue. The allure of telekinesis, the power to move or manipulate objects without physical contact, is undeniable. Imagine the implications: healing without touch, dismantling weapons from afar, or even shaping raw materials with thought alone. Historically, stories of such feats appear in various cultures and religious texts, often attributed to saints, shamans, or divine figures. In modern times, fictional characters like Jean Grey from X-Men or Matilda Wormwood from Matilda have cemented telekinesis as a symbol of extraordinary mental prowess. However, distinguishing these fictional narratives from genuine, verifiable phenomena is crucial. The realm of psi abilities, though often bordering on the fantastic, has captivated human imagination for millennia. Beyond the broad category of psychokinesis, of which telekinesis is the most visually dramatic form, lie a multitude of other purported mental faculties. Psychokinesis itself is often divided into macropark, referring to large-scale effects visible to the naked eye, and micropark, involving subtle, small-scale effects that require statistical analysis to detect. Macropark is the stuff of movies and legends, with examples such as levitation, the classic image of objects floating or a person rising into the air. Historical accounts, particularly within spiritualist circles during the 19th and early 20th centuries, often describe mediums supposedly levitating tables or even themselves during seances. These mediums would reportedly enter trance states, with objects like tables or even their own bodies defying gravity in dimly lit rooms. These events often occurred under conditions that favored illusion, such as red light or obscured views, which allowed for the manipulation of hidden wires or concealed mechanisms. Investigators, often stage magicians and skeptical researchers, meticulously replicated these effects using mundane means, demonstrating the ease with which such phenomena could be faked. It's a fact that many such performances were later exposed as parlor tricks, contributing to the strong scientific skepticism surrounding macropark claims. Another claim is that of apports, the apparent materialization or disappearance of objects, seemingly out of thin air. Again, mediums in spiritualist movements were known to claim apports, with small objects like flowers or stones purportedly appearing. These were often produced from secret compartments or skillfully concealed by the medium, only to be produced at a dramatic moment. Investigations often revealed that objects were smuggled in or out through deceptive means, or that the materialization was a cleverly executed substitution. Pyrokinesis, the ability to mentally generate or control fire, is a staple in fiction, but there are no scientifically validated cases. Spontaneous human combustion, SHC, a rare and unexplained phenomenon where a human body appears to ignite without an obvious external source, is sometimes anecdotally linked to uncontrolled pyrokinetic abilities. However, scientific consensus attributes SHC to complex chemical processes within the body, potentially involving internal ignition of highly flammable fatty tissues or interaction with external accelerants, although the exact mechanism remains a subject of ongoing research rather than an act of psychokinesis. It's a known fact that forensic investigations of SHC cases often find evidence of an accelerant or an external ignition source, even if initially overlooked. Perhaps the most famous example of claimed macropark is metal bending, notably associated with a renowned metalist who gained widespread fame in the 1970s for allegedly bending spoons and keys with his mind. He captivated audiences and even some scientific observers with his performances, particularly during televised appearances where he would seemingly bend cutlery without physical force. While initially impressive, seasoned illusionists and scientists eventually demonstrated how these feats could be achieved through mundane means, such as applying subtle pressure or pre-bending objects through mechanical leverage or heat, often utilizing misdirection to conceal the physical act. Prominent skeptics rigorously challenged these performances, actively demonstrating the deceptive techniques involved and offering substantial rewards for verifiable demonstrations under controlled conditions, which were never successfully claimed. It is a fact that many of the medalists' alleged feats were successfully replicated by magicians using sleight of hand. The skepticism surrounding these events highlights a significant hurdle in the study of psi phenomena, the ease with which deception and misinterpretation can occur. The human mind is highly susceptible to confirmation bias, where individuals tend to seek out and interpret information in a way that confirms their preconceived beliefs, and the power of suggestion can profoundly influence perception. The mentalist himself later acknowledged using showmanship alongside genuine psychic claims. Finally, poltergeist phenomena, characterized by unexplained noises, thrown objects, shifting furniture, and general physical disturbances frequently without a visible source, are sometimes attributed to spirits in folklore. However, some parapsychological theories propose that these are not entities, but rather unconscious, uncontrolled macro-park emanating from a living person, often an adolescent experiencing emotional distress or psychological trauma. Certain well-documented cases, such as an incident in a European attorney's office in the late 1960s involving flickering lights and moving objects, drew considerable attention. Initial investigations by physicists suggested anomalies, but subsequent, more thorough inquiries revealed that many disturbances could be attributed to mundane causes like faulty wiring or deliberate deception by a young person associated with the office. It's a recurring pattern in poltergeist investigations that human agents or environmental factors are eventually identified as the cause. Many reported poltergeist cases have been attributed to psychological factors, misinterpretations of natural events, like structural settling or drafts, or outright hoaxes perpetrated for attention or other motives. Micropark, on the other hand, involves subtle, small-scale effects that require statistical analysis to detect, often focusing on influencing random events. Random number generators, RNGs, are a primary tool in modern parapsychology, where participants attempt to mentally influence the output of a computer program designed to generate truly random sequences of numbers or bits, for example, trying to make more ones appear than zeros. Researchers use highly sensitive equipment and conduct thousands or millions of trials, looking for statistically significant deviations from chance. These deviations are analyzed using standard statistical methods, such as chi-squared tests or t-tests, to determine if the observed distribution of outputs differs significantly from what would be expected by random chance. While some prominent research laboratories reported small but statistically significant effects over decades of investigation, independent replication by other laboratories has been inconsistent, and the effects often diminish or disappear under stricter controls. A key fact is that the average effect size reported in these studies is extremely small, often represented by Cohen's d values typically less than 0.05. To put this in perspective, a Cohen's d of 0.2 is considered a small effect in social sciences, while a d of 0.8 is large. The observed effects in micropark are typically an order of magnitude smaller than what is commonly considered a small effect. Critics argue that even small statistically significant results can be due to methodological flaws, experimenter expectancy effects, where unconscious cues from the experimenter might influence the participant, or the file drawer problem, where negative results are not published, leading to a skewed perception of overall positive findings. Early parapsychological experiments also involved participants attempting to influence the outcome of dice rolls. Subjects might try to make a specific number appear more frequently than chance would predict. One noted participant, a divinity student from an early study conducted in the mid-20th century, reportedly achieved consistently above chance scores in card-guessing experiments where he attempted to influence the fall of dice. Similar to RNG experiments, these studies often yielded marginal results that faced criticism regarding methodology and potential biases, including the experimenter effect where the researcher's expectations might unconsciously influence results. Beyond influencing inanimate objects, some experiments have explored whether mental intention can influence the growth rate or health of plants. For example, a polygraph expert in the 1960s claimed that plants responded emotionally to human thoughts and intentions, even at a distance, based on specific physiological readings from plant leaves, suggesting a form of biopark. While his findings captivated the public and sparked interest in plant consciousness, subsequent independent research failed to consistently replicate his results under controlled conditions, and his claims are widely considered pseudoscientific. It is a scientific fact that plants respond to environmental stimuli like light and water, but not to human thoughts as demonstrated by controlled experiments. Similarly, claims of influencing the crystallization of water or its melting point through mental focus have been made, often tied to concepts of water memory or consciousness affecting molecular structures, as famously explored by a Japanese researcher. This individual claimed that human thoughts and intentions directed towards water could affect the aesthetic formation of its ice crystals, with positive intentions leading to beautiful formations and negative ones to distorted shapes. His popular books, featuring selected photographs to illustrate his theories, gained widespread appeal. However, his methods lacked scientific rigor, including a lack of blinding and objective criteria for crystal selection, and his results have never been replicated by independent, controlled scientific studies. A fundamental fact of chemistry is that water's molecular structure and crystallization are governed by temperature, pressure, and impurities, not by human thoughts or emotions. Beyond psychokinesis, a fascinating array of other psi abilities are explored in parapsychology. Telepathy, the direct transfer of thoughts, feelings, or sensations from one mind to another without the use of conventional communication channels, has been investigated through various methods. Early pioneering work heavily relied on specific card decks with simple symbols, where a sender would focus on a card and a receiver in another room would attempt to identify it. In a typical telepathy experiment, hits significantly above the 20% chance level, for a 5-symbol deck, were considered evidence of telepathy. While some initial reports claimed positive results, later analyses often found methodological flaws, for example, inadequate shuffling, sensory leakage where cues could inadvertently pass between rooms, and the effects proved difficult to replicate reliably by other researchers. Critics pointed to issues such as auditory cues, imperfect shuffling, and data recording errors that could inflate scores. A more sophisticated method, the Ganzfeld experiment, was designed to create a noisy environment to reduce external sensory input and amplify any subtle psychic signals. Developed in the 1970s, it gained prominence through the work of a prominent parapsychologist. The receiver is placed in a mild sensory deprivation state, typically with headphones providing white noise and have ping-pong balls over the eyes illuminated by a red light, to minimize external distractions. A sender in a separate, soundproofed room focuses on a randomly selected target image or video. The receiver then reports any images, thoughts, or feelings they experience, and later attempts to identify the target from a set of foils. The results are typically analyzed using a binomial probability model, assessing whether the number of correct guesses exceeds chance expectation. While some meta-analyses of Ganzfeld studies have reported a small overall effect that is statistically significant, though often just barely, critics point to issues like sensory leakage, unintended cues, like subtle sounds, selective reporting, and weaknesses in randomization procedures. A significant fact is that despite years of Ganzfeld research, no independent laboratory has consistently achieved the positive results reported by some proponents under strict, double-blind conditions. Despite attempts to address these criticisms in Ganzfeld studies that automate the process to remove human bias, the overall effect size remains small and often debated within the scientific community. The idea of dream telepathy, where telepathic communication occurs between individuals during sleep, when conscious filters might be lowered, has also been explored. Experiments conducted at a major medical center in the United States in the 1960s and 70s involved a sender focusing on a target image before sleep, while a receiver sleeps in a separate location, later reporting their dreams to see if they correspond to the target. While intriguing, the subjective nature of dream recall, the difficulty in establishing clear correspondences between dreams and targets, and the challenge of preventing sensory leakage make scientific validation highly problematic. It's a fact that dream interpretation is highly subjective and prone to confirmation bias, making it difficult to objectively assess correspondences. Clairvoyance, or remote viewing, refers to the ability to perceive information about objects, people, or events that are hidden from normal senses, often at a distance or obscured from direct perception. Scientific attempts have included hidden object tests, where subjects might try to describe a hidden object in a sealed box, a randomly selected image in a distant location, or details of an event occurring far away. Remote viewing, RV, was particularly popularized during Cold War-era government-funded programs, most notably a classified project in the United States, active from the 1970s to 1990s. Key figures included physicists who were involved in these investigations, purportedly using RV for intelligence gathering. RV involved a viewer attempting to describe or sketch a target site that was unknown to them, often hundreds or thousands of miles away, given only a set of coordinates or a vague description. The descriptions provided by viewers were then blind rated by independent judges against actual target features. While proponents claimed remarkable successes, particularly regarding military intelligence applications, for example, allegedly describing elements of a foreign submarine base or capturing details of specific facilities, Critical analyses of these programs by oversight committees found the results ambiguous, inconsistent, and ultimately lacked sufficient actionable intelligence, leading to the program's termination. A key fact is that the final government report on this project concluded that the evidence for RV was not sufficient to justify continued funding. The successes were frequently attributed to general descriptions that could fit multiple locations, or confirmation bias where viewers' broad descriptions were interpreted as hits while failures were ignored. Precognition, the ability to perceive or have knowledge of future events before they happen without any logical inference or prior knowledge, has also been a subject of research. This includes experiments where participants try to predict the outcome of a future random event, such as the next number generated by an RNG, before it occurs. A controversial paper published in a major psychology journal in 2011 by a social psychologist reported positive results for precognition in several experiments, such as participants being faster to recall words they would be asked to memorize after the recall test, or responding to stimuli that were about to appear. This paper sparked intense debate and numerous replication attempts worldwide. However, the vast majority of these independent replication efforts, conducted by researchers in various countries, failed to reproduce the initial findings. This collective failure to replicate effectively serves as the last known significant scientific examination of precognition that received widespread attention, and its outcome reinforced skepticism within the broader scientific community. This failure to replicate initial positive findings is a significant fact that underscores the challenges of validating psi phenomena. Other feeling the future studies involve presenting participants with a series of images, some emotionally neutral and some emotionally aroused, and measuring physiological responses, for example, skin conductance, heart rate, brain activity via fMRI, before the image is displayed. Researchers look for a statistically significant anticipatory physiological response that precedes the presentation of emotionally salient stimuli. Some parapsychological studies have reported a slight pre-stimulus physiological response, suggesting a possible unconscious foreknowledge or a presentiment effect. However, these effects are typically very small, often at the edge of statistical significance, and open to alternative explanations like subtle experimental artifacts or data selection. Anecdotal accounts abound of individuals dreaming of future events that later come true. For instance, a tragic disaster in a European country in the mid-1960s, where a coal waste tip collapsed on a school, led to a collection of precognitive dream reports after the fact by individuals who claimed to have foreseen the tragedy. While compelling to those who experience them, these are difficult to scientifically verify due to the subjective nature of dreams, selective memory, and the tendency to find patterns in random occurrences, for example, confirmation bias, where numerous non-prophetic dreams are forgotten. A crucial fact about anecdotal evidence is that it lacks the controls necessary for scientific validation and is susceptible to cognitive biases. Another related ability is retrocognition, the ability to perceive or have knowledge of past events that were not personally experienced or learned through conventional means, beyond historical records. Examples are often anecdotal, such as individuals claiming to see or feel historical events in old buildings, at specific historical sites, or through psychic archaeology where a psychic claims to discern details about ancient civilizations or buried artifacts. Scientific testing for retrocognition is particularly challenging due to the difficulty of verifying truly unknown past information independently and objectively, and accounts can often be explained by subconscious assimilation of historical facts or clever inference. The ways in which individuals purport to know or access information through these abilities vary widely in anecdotal accounts and theoretical models, though they lack concrete scientific explanation. For telepathy, the proposed mechanisms range from a direct, non-physical transfer of thought patterns, akin to a shared mental radio wave, to a collective unconscious reservoir from which information can be drawn. Individuals often describe experiencing sudden insights, feelings, or even hearing voices that they interpret as coming from another person's mind. For clairvoyance and remote viewing, the common description involves a kind of mental vision or inner knowing where information about a distant or hidden object or event is spontaneously perceived, often as images, sensations, or symbolic representations. Practitioners might enter a meditative state or focus intensely on a target to facilitate this seeing. Precognition is often reported as dreams, flashes of insight, or a strong gut feeling about a future event. Some propose a nonlinear flow of information outside of conventional time, allowing glimpses of the future to leak into the present consciousness. For psychokinesis, the subjective experience is typically one of intense mental concentration, visualization, or willing an object to move or change. This mental energy is often described as a focused intent directed at the target, sometimes accompanied by physical sensations in the practitioner's body. However, it is crucial to understand that these are subjective descriptions of purported internal processes and do not represent scientifically verifiable mechanisms. No known neurological or physical pathways have been identified to explain how these transfers or perceptions might occur within the established scientific framework. The human brain's complex neural networks and electrochemical signals are understood to be the basis of thought and consciousness, and there is no empirical evidence of a mechanism that allows these processes to directly influence external matter or to receive information outside of sensory input. If such mechanisms existed, they would necessitate the discovery of new fundamental forces or forms of energy beyond the four known fundamental interactions: strong, weak, electromagnetic, and gravitational. This remains a significant scientific hurdle. Scientific investigation into psi abilities, including psychokinesis, gained some traction in the 20th century, particularly through parapsychology, which aimed to apply scientific methodology to these phenomena. Pioneering researchers at prominent universities conducted numerous experiments, attempting to quantify and reproduce psi effects under laboratory conditions. While some early studies reported statistically significant results that appeared to deviate from chance expectations, these findings were often small in effect size and proved difficult to consistently replicate. Replication, the cornerstone of scientific validity, has been a persistent challenge for parapsychology. The inability to consistently replicate results under controlled conditions is a major barrier to scientific acceptance. It's a fact that the scientific community largely requires independent replication of a phenomenon before it is accepted as real. The discussion of telekinesis and other psi abilities inevitably leads to the question of the last known or most compelling cases. However, it's crucial to frame this within the context of scientific rigor. For mainstream science, there are no currently verifiable, repeatable, or accepted cases of telekinesis or other psi abilities that meet the criteria for scientific proof. Any claims of such abilities, particularly at the macro level, visible movement of objects, have either been debunked as hoaxes, attributed to known physical phenomena, or have failed to be replicated under controlled conditions designed to prevent trickery or misinterpretation. Therefore, when discussing the last known cases, one must distinguish between historically notable cases that generated significant public and, at times, scientific interest, but were later discredited or lacked conclusive evidence, and ongoing parapsychological research, which continues to explore subtle, micro-level effects, but has not produced phenomena that would satisfy mainstream scientific standards for proof of telekinesis or overt psi abilities. No recent, confirmed, and independently verifiable case of telekinesis or any other macro-level psi ability has emerged in the scientific community that would challenge the current understanding of physical laws. The challenges of replication, methodological flaws, and the absence of a theoretical framework continue to be the primary obstacles. However, parapsychological research does continue to investigate potential micropark and other subtle psi effects, and some studies, when subjected to meta-analysis, report small but statistically significant deviations from chance. These are not cases in the sense of a single individual performing a dramatic feat, but rather aggregate statistical results from thousands of trials. For instance, research utilizing random number generators, RNGs, often associated with the work of contemporary parapsychologists, continues to be a primary area of investigation for micropark. In these experiments, participants attempt to influence the output of an RNG, for example, trying to make it generate more high numbers than low numbers. The last known or ongoing case in this context refers to the cumulative data from thousands of trials over decades, across various laboratories, which sometimes show a tiny, statistically significant deviation from randomness. For example, some meta-analyses in parapsychology suggest a small effect size, typically in the range of cohen's d equals 0.02 to 0.05, meaning a very subtle influence, which is considered extremely weak in scientific terms, even if statistically significant. To put this in perspective, a Cohen's d of 0.2 is considered a small effect in social sciences, while a d of 0.8 is large. The observed effects in micropark are typically an order of magnitude smaller than what is commonly considered a small effect. These effects are often so small that they are not perceptible without extensive statistical analysis and are susceptible to various methodological critiques, as discussed previously, for example, the file drawer problem, potential subtle biases. Similarly, in the realm of telepathy and clairvoyance, the Gansfeld experiments, while controversial, represent some of the more recent and rigorous efforts to detect psi abilities in laboratory settings. Research by teams in various countries, including European and North American institutions, has continued to refine these protocols, using automated systems to prevent experimenter effects and sensory leakage. While some meta-analyses of Ganzfeld studies have reported a modest overall effect, consistently finding hits slightly above chance expectation, around 30 to 35% success rate where 25% is chance for a 4-target force choice test. These findings are still debated and have not achieved widespread acceptance among mainstream scientists due to issues of inconsistent replication and the difficulty in definitively ruling out all non-psi explanations. No single last known dramatic case of telepathy or clairvoyance has been scientifically verified through these methods. Regarding precognition, the most recent notable discussion in mainstream psychology stemmed from a controversial paper published in a peer-reviewed psychology journal in 2011. This paper, which reported positive results for precognition in several experiments, such as participants being faster to recall words they would be asked to memorize after the recall test, or responding to stimuli that were about to appear, sparked intense debate and numerous replication attempts worldwide. However, the vast majority of these independent replication efforts, conducted by researchers in various countries, failed to reproduce the initial findings. This collective failure to replicate effectively serves as the last known significant scientific examination of precognition that received widespread attention, and its outcome reinforced skepticism within the broader scientific community. The persistent lack of robust, independently replicable evidence for these abilities remains the central scientific hurdle. Several factors contribute to this. The replication crisis, where many initial positive results in parapsychology have failed to be replicated consistently by other researchers, or the effect sizes diminish significantly in subsequent, more rigorous studies, is a critical blow to any scientific claim, as a phenomenon must be reliably observable by different researchers using the same methods, minimizing the chance of spurious correlations. Methodological flaws, such as sensory leakage, unintended cues that could provide information to subjects, poor randomization procedures, lack of proper controls, for example, single-blind or double-blind protocols, and experimenter bias, where the researcher's expectations might unconsciously influence the outcome or interpretation of results, also plague early experiments. Modern parapsychological research employs more rigorous methodologies to address these, such as highly automated experimental setups and pre-registered protocols, but challenges persist. For instance, even subtle non-randomness in random stimuli can be exploited by subjects if they possess a subconscious awareness of these patterns. The file drawer problem refers to the tendency for studies with null or negative results to remain unpublished, while studies with positive, even if marginal, results are published. This can create a skewed perception of the overall evidence, making it seem as if there are more positive findings than there truly are across all conducted research. Furthermore, mainstream science lacks a coherent theoretical framework that could explain how psi abilities might operate within the known laws of physics and biology. Without a plausible mechanism, many scientists are hesitant to accept even statistically significant findings as evidence of a new phenomenon. While some French theories propose connections to consciousness and quantum mechanics, for example, quantum consciousness models which suggest consciousness arises from quantum processes in brain microtubules, these remain highly speculative and unproven. Critics argue that the brain is too warm and noisy for quantum coherence to be sustained long enough to support such effects, and these theories often misinterpret or overextend quantum principles far beyond their established domains, often conflating quantum weirdness at the subatomic level with macroscopic phenomena. The problem of measurement is also significant. How do you precisely measure a thought, an intention, or a psi force? Current scientific tools are designed to measure physical phenomena, energy, mass, force, electromagnetic fields. The direct measurement of a non-physical psi force or its specific energy signature remains impossible with current technology, making empirical investigation exceptionally challenging. Finally, the decline effect, where even in some studies that initially show positive results, the effect seems to diminish or disappear over time, or with repeated testing of the same subjects, further complicates replication and raises questions about the nature of the phenomenon, if it exists, potentially indicating a statistical fluke, a psychological effect, or a subtle change in experimental conditions. The scientific method is inherently skeptical, demanding rigorous proof for extraordinary claims. While parapsychologists argue that some anomalous data cannot be explained by known physics, critics contend that the burden of proof rests with the claimant, and that alternative, non-paranormal explanations, even if currently undiscovered, are always more probable than a violation of fundamental laws of nature. From a scientific perspective, the primary challenge to the existence of telekinesis and other psi abilities lies in their apparent violation of fundamental physical laws. The conservation of energy, for instance, dictates that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. For a mind to exert a force on an object and cause it to move would require a transfer of energy from the mind to the object. The mechanisms by which this energy transfer could occur, and the nature of the mental energy itself, remain entirely unknown and unmeasurable by current scientific instruments. To exert a force F over a distance d requires work W equals Fd, which implies a transfer of energy. If the mind were to supply this energy, it would need a verifiable energy source and a coupling mechanism to the physical world, neither of which has ever been detected. The human brain, while consuming about 20 watts of power, primarily uses this energy for metabolic processes and neural communication, not for external physical work. Similarly, the laws of thermodynamics, particularly the second law which describes the tendency towards increasing entropy or disorder, pose significant challenges. Creating order or moving objects in a way that defies random thermal motion would require an input of highly organized energy, contradicting the natural progression of entropy unless a novel energy source is involved. Quantum mechanics, while often invoked by proponents, does not offer a coherent explanation for macroscopic psi phenomena. While phenomena like entanglement and superposition are real at the quantum scale, they are fragile and decohere rapidly in warm, complex biological systems. Misinterpretations often conflate the observer effect, where measurement influences a quantum state, with conscious intent directly manipulating physical reality. The brain's neurological activity, understood as electrochemical impulses, provides no known pathway for direct interaction with external matter or information transfer beyond sensory input. There is no empirical evidence of a psi field or mental force that interacts with known fundamental forces, strong, weak, electromagnetic, gravitational, or particles. Furthermore, the immense complexity of the human brain itself poses a barrier to understanding its full capabilities. While billions of neurons and trillions of synaptic connections enable complex thought, emotion, and action, all these processes are currently understood to operate within the established laws of physics and chemistry. The emergence of consciousness from these physical interactions is a profound scientific mystery, but the prevailing view is that consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, not a separate entity capable of directly influencing external matter. The brain's electrical activity, measured by techniques like fMRI, is incredibly subtle and localized, orders of magnitude too weak to exert any measurable force on external objects. The very notion of a mental energy acting outside the body would require a paradigm shift in physics, akin to discovering a fifth fundamental force. Despite the lack of mainstream scientific acceptance, research into psi abilities continues in some niche academic settings, often within parapsychology departments or institutes affiliated with universities. Researchers employ more rigorous methodologies, double-blind protocols, automated systems, and advanced statistical analysis to minimize bias and the potential for fraud. Some studies explore the concept of micropark, attempting to influence random event generators at a very subtle level, often with highly sophisticated equipment to detect minuscule deviations from randomness. Statistical methods such as meta-analysis are used to combine results from multiple studies, aiming to detect small, consistent effects that might be missed in individual experiments. However, even in these highly controlled environments, consistent and replicable evidence of macro-level telekinesis remains elusive, and the overall effect sizes for micropark are typically very small, often less than 0.1 on Cohen's d scale, leading many mainstream scientists to attribute them to statistical anomalies or undiscovered methodological flaws rather than a genuine psychic phenomenon. For instance, while some meta-analyses in parapsychology report a statistically significant but tiny mean effect size for RNG influence, these are often criticized for heterogeneity among studies, publication bias, and sensitivity to outlier results. The profound implications of scientifically validated telekinesis and other psi abilities would be transformative. It would necessitate a complete re-evaluation of our understanding of consciousness, energy, the fundamental forces of nature, and the very fabric of reality. It could revolutionize fields from medicine, for example, psychic healing, where a mental energy could influence biological processes at a cellular level, to engineering, for example, manipulating materials with thought, potentially leading to new manufacturing techniques or direct brain-computer interfaces without physical connections, and communication, for example, direct mind-to-mind communication, transcending technological limitations like bandwidth or language barriers. However, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Until such evidence emerges from rigorously controlled, independently replicable scientific studies that can withstand the highest levels of scrutiny and integrate coherently into the existing scientific framework, Telekinesis and other psi abilities will likely remain firmly in the realm of speculation, fascinating us with their potential while continuing to challenge the boundaries of what we currently understand about the universe and the human mind. The ongoing tension between belief and skepticism, between compelling anecdotal accounts and the stringent demands of empirical data, defines the enduring mystery of these elusive phenomena.